All right, we ready to go?
Yeah.
Ready to start?
Are
Are you ready, Dave? You good?
It's the same drink.
Yeah, it is.
Ah.
Yours is a bit more
I just-
shiny and classy.
Yeah, I went for the metal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sign of your elitism.
Or is it a sign that I drop things?
Welcome back, everyone, to the Chip Lunch podcast. It is exciting to have you along with us as usual, and it's exciting to have two guests along with me. One very special guest, and one... No, not talking about you, Brayden.
You're so excited.
Wow.
You're like
Oh,
me.
like what is this rap I'm getting from Joel?
Save the wraps for the chips.
Wow.
Brayden, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
It's great to have you on again.
It's good to be back.
It's good to be back since I last saw you on Jen's podcast.
Yeah.
You're the COVID kid. You've recovered.
I'm recovered.
You're ready to go.
I'm ready to go.
Excellent. Brayden, do you want to introduce our special guest for us?
Ooh, just blessing me so much today. I'm so encouraged.
Let's go.
Welcome to Soul Revival's newest pastor,
Yes.
Joey.
Thanks, guys. Good to be here.
It's great for you. I'm very grateful for you to coming on so early in your tenure.
Yeah.
as a
New
pastor.
kid on the block.
Yeah, that's right.
Straight on. Yeah, it's cool.
Well, I thought often we usually go straight into the chips question, but I thought it might be interesting to kind of chat a little bit, just the really quick story about what you're doing right now and why you've arrived at Soul Revival Church. Do you want to give us that quickly before we ask you the normal questions?
Yeah, sure. I guess I would probably start with finishing Bible college.
Yep.
So just graduated from Moore Theological College. It's been 4 years of study and a great time there. Just lots of learning, going deeper into God's Word. A lot of just growing myself, just in terms of God teaching me so many things about what it means to serve, what it means to follow Jesus, and to tell others about Jesus. So really excited coming out of that to think about what I would be doing next. And that was the end of last year. And then I guess, it's like any kind of course, you finish university or TAFE or college, you got to find work after that. And so, there was a period where I guess most graduates, they'll be talking to different churches or different ministries and figuring out whether they're a good fit to serve the people in the congregations. I guess an interesting kind of connection was that Grace, who came to Soul Revival during her study, she originally, we were both from the same church in West Ryde.
Oh, yeah.
Ages ago. And they had, started dreaming with Stu about what they could do maybe in the West Ryde area or the Ryde area in ways that are similar to Soul Revival, loving the stuff that you guys are doing here and wanting to see that happen in Ryde. And so because of that connection, just kind of all sorts of things just came together. And one of my really close friends, Ian, who was my Bible study leader when I was in youth group back in the day, he is on that team with Grace. And so just through all those kind of connections, the timing of finishing college, those guys in West Ryde, kind of growing and looking for a location and feeling like it was a time where they might need someone to come along and join as a assistant minister. And so they pitched it to Stu. They're like, we don't know what Stu's going to think, but let's just run it anyway. Yeah.
Fantastic. And then how did that eventuate? Was it a long? Did you and your wife Mary and your son Joshua? Did you have to spend a lot of time thinking about that and praying about that?
Yeah, we did actually. So we met with Stu and we had a chat with him, I think before Christmas, actually last year. But the nature of the role is kind of quite different from what I was expecting I would come into coming out of college. It's, a kind of church planting, starting with a new bunch of Christians, really exciting stuff. But at the same time, kind of a bit daunting.
It's not what you thought it was going to be, as you said.
Well, I think I throughout the years just hearing stories about church planting. Maybe because there were a lot of stories from America as well, and their kind of models of church planting, and kind of looking at that and looking at those church planters and going, I don't know if like that's me. I don't know if I have the same gifts that they have. I don't know if I'm wired the same way. So
I think there's definitely like an archetype, like there's this archetype of a church planter, gung ho kind of,
especially out of America. Is that
I think America really feeds that.
So I think I had that kind of picture, which is not true for all, kind of all different types of church planting. But I think at that early stage, that's the picture I had. I was like, well, that's obviously not me. And so when the West Ryde guys came to talk to me about it, and then when I was chatting to Stu, I was still quite unsure and how it would affect our family as well. How it would affect, I guess, Mary, and we're expecting another baby in April.
A few weeks, right?
Less than a month.
Wow.
So that's coming along, and being part of a new church plant. So there were lots of things we had to talk about. Lots of things that were on her mind. I think I don't think she'd mind me sharing this, but in terms of ambiguity tolerance, like just things like where you have to be just super flexible, particularly in church planting.
Especially with a young family.
Especially with a young family. We just, I think, had a lot to kind of talk about and make. For me, I think I learnt a lot about looking after her as my wife and going, it's not just about me anymore. Like when I was single, I could just put my hand up and go, I'm in, guys. I'll do it. But particularly in this kind of venture, lots of time just spent praying and chatting and making sure she was actually okay to do it. And if she wasn't, that we would just say, maybe that's not where God wants us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's a really cool way. Just thank you for accepting the role.
No, we're glad to be here.
We're stoked. I mean, I've been out to hang out with the West Ryde crew, and I loved it. The guys there are just so encouraging, and I love them heaps. And every time I see them, I'm stoked to see them, because they are just like, the fact that they're, even throughout COVID, they've grown in number, which is fantastic, and just the generosity as well to figure out how to get you a position to work as well. I just love them. I think they've been a fantastic addition to our church, and they're going to continue to encourage us in many years to come, along with your leadership. So I'm stoked for it. So because you've been to West Ryde too, right?
I even did. So Berea is a training course we run in-house here at Soul Revival, and I was doing both Wednesdays and Fridays for a whole year. So I did the training with the guys at Berea, along with doing training here at Kirrawee, just when I was able to in life, and I wanted to hang out, and it was very fun I was doing double bubble, but it was very fun to just get to hang out with those guys. I even went over a couple of times for some meetings and stuff with Stu, just to hang out. Really great. Yeah, they're the best. They're just so encouraging in so many different ways, and it's just so cool to get to drive over this other side of Sydney and just be welcomed so openly. And also just, they're so thoughtful in everything they do. It's so encouraging.
Yeah, we're stoked to have them as part of our church.
Absolutely.
Let's go back to Joey.
Yes.
And let's go all the way back to the beginning, as we kind of really start most Chip Lunch podcasts, which is the first question we always like to ask is, how do you like to eat your hot chips?
So I think the way I really liked it when I was growing up was it's chicken salt, but also with gravy.
Oh, that's interesting. Not many people have said gravy before.
We've had a few.
We've had quite a few say chicken salt.
Jabish said gravy.
That's interesting.
So there was a place in Eastwood, which is a suburb next to West Ryde, that we used to go to a lot. It was called the Red Rooster of Eastwood. So it wasn't it wasn't Red Rooster as in the franchise. I think they I don't know, maybe they couldn't afford it or something. So they were the Red Rooster of Eastwood. And they did the best, I think it was the gravy that got me.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
So wow. I'm not a huge fan of gravy.
No?
No.
Yeah.
Or chicken salt. So
Well, yeah.
yeah, you're off the podcast,
No.
Joey. with everyone we get on, we ask them obviously the same question, and like there's a real battle between chicken salt and real salt, and I'm very much on
Real salt.
That's what it's
Yeah.
called, real salt.
Plain salt.
Yeah. Well, you decided to call it chicken salt.
You
for
were
some
catching,
reason.
like plain salt was catching up for a while.
I was, but
But
yeah,
I think we've extended the lead. again.
Yeah. I'm gonna just have to get guests on, and I'll call them first. And
Yeah,
say,
exactly. You'll
what-
start vetting.
You're allowed on.
vetting. That's a good idea. Just got to vet you with a couple
You
of questions.
sign this
Yeah.
form
Do you
first.
like chicken salt or plain salt? And they're like, and then just hang up on them if they say chicken salt or anything else. Anyway, so gravy is your sauce, and you just have chips with gravy, and that's it. You don't add anything else.
No, I don't add any. Oh, actually, I would say actually during COVID, I know this is like we had the gravy thing, but this second addition was that during like I guess coming out of COVID lockdown, some of the guys at college we would get chips, hot chips, and then one of the guys he made hot sauces at home.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And they were good.
And so there was a period where it was hot sauce and garlic sauce together.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was actually surprisingly good.
Oh, that sounds really good.
Yeah.
Sounds very like a flavor explosion. There were
Yeah.
a lot of strong flavors with garlic.
People
and
were sweating. But we all liked kind of like the spicy hit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Our second question, Brayden.
Yeah.
Would you like to ask it of Joey?
What an honor. Joey, how did you become a Christian?
Yeah. I have to rewind a
Yeah.
fair bit. Yeah. Well, I should probably start with, I guess, a bit of family background.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, my parents came over from Hong Kong, and I think it was 3 years before I was born.
Yeah.
What do you know? What year that was?
Oh, that would be 83,
1983.
1983.
All right. Cool.
Cool.
Yeah, and they came over to kind of started a new life, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I think they would say they were maybe agnostic, maybe not atheists, but
Yeah.
agnostic. Usually, coming from Hong Kong, the traditional kind of religion,
Yeah.
if you're a bit nominal or if you haven't really made a decision for yourself, is kind of like a ancestor worship.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Or sometimes it's kind of a Taoist kind of Buddhism.
Mm.
Yeah. But for them, I think they were fairly agnostic. They came to Australia, and I think they were just keen to, start a new life. And so that's the kind of family I grew up in.
Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of looking to grow up in Australia. So I was born in the northwestern kind of region, actually in West Ryde. Sorry. Yeah, I grew up in West Ryde.
Full circle.
Yeah, it really is actually. It's I guess we can come back to that, but
Yep.
yeah, that's where I grew up. So it's pretty much home
Yeah.
for me. And but when we moved to West Ryde, and that was when I was 4, because kind of grew up in Meadowbank, and then moved when I was 4 to West Ryde, and we were, I think, the only kind of Asian family on that street at that time. Yeah, I mean now it's quite a different area.
I was going to say it's very different now.
It's very
right?
different.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at that time, we were the only Asian family. But it was still nice. Like, we got to know our neighbors, really friendly.
Yeah.
But it was after, I think, a few years into that, actually more than a few years, kind of late primary school.
Yeah.
When I was in year 4, 5, I think another Chinese family moved in across the road, and we became friends with them. But they were Christian, so they were a Christian family.
Oh, yeah.
I'd go over to learn piano actually from the mom, and so we got to know them really well. But when they first moved in, they were looking for a church, and they asked my mum, and my mum was like, "Oh, I don't go to church," but my mum's she's really creative, so she's into art and crafts. She's just very skilled, really gifted in that.
Awesome.
And she used to teach a lot of the ladies in the community, like whether it's at the community centre or at
Oh, wow.
some of the library, and just teach. And so she knew a lot of people. She's like, oh yeah, I know some of the ladies from the local kind of Chinese church down the road. And so she mentioned that to them. So that was the Chinese Australian Baptist Church in West Ryde. And that's where they went. So they kind of went down there for a few Sundays. And after a few weeks, they're like, hey, would Joey like to go? And my sister as well, they invited her. And I think my parents were, they were kind of like, yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah.
You know, he's not doing that much actually, Sunday mornings anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's how, I guess that was the first exposure to church life. I think I went more to the youth group actually at the beginning. So it's like Friday nights.
Yeah.
And particularly during high school, that was kind of just a really fun place to be. Kind of people who got me, and got to hang out a lot. Liked doing the same things, liked playing sports, liked playing basketball, liked playing Magic. Like that was a bit nerdy, but
Magic the Gathering,
the card game.
Right.
Yeah. So that was a bit of that was our time in high school.
Oh yeah.
And so that was where a lot of friendships were at that church. I think I went along during that time, and there was just a lot to just kind of take in from the Bible, and I really, I guess I enjoyed it. I think during like junior high to mid high school, I was asking questions about this kind of life, about things about the world, creation, whether that was true, things about like suffering and kind of the bad things that were happening in the world, wanting to know, why is it that happens? And so that was kind of throughout high school. And I think looking into, I guess just even dipping into different religions and looking at them, and then kind of going to the Bible and going, oh, I think the Bible has kind of the most explanatory kind of power. I wouldn't have said it in those terms back then, but I think it kind of made sense to me a lot more of, why is it that we want to be good people. Often we want to treat people nicely, but why is it that we don't? Like so often, like why do we see like bullying at school and like tragic things happen across the world?
Yeah.
I think the idea of sin and the kind of really explained some of the brokenness of the world, even though God had created us, and but there was the fall. There was something that we did that broken. That was the reason for the brokenness in this world, the messiness of it. But I guess the interesting thing was that even though that explained a lot for me, for the most part, even as I thought about the gospel and how good is it that someone would die for, even though he did no wrong, like Jesus was perfect. And then as I looked at the Bible and go, wow, that's amazing. It was still quite, I guess, intellectual in many ways. I think it explained a lot for me, and it just kind of made sense, at least in my head. To the point where I think even during high school, I would have called myself a Christian. I would have said, like I really like what the Bible has to say about how we ought to live life and who Jesus is. But at the same time, I think it was still quite intellectual. And it wasn't until the end of high school where I think it was when they were doing maybe Bible studies in Romans, and I was just, one day, I remember it quite vividly, one day in my room, it was during the HSC kind of time, should have been studying. I'm just rocking back and forth in my chair and thinking about the verse in Romans, 5:8, chapter 5, verse 8, is, that Christ shows his love for us, that even while we were still, that God shows his love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And there was this moment where, I'd heard it many times, but at that point, I think God really just opened my eyes to go, it's not just everyone else out there. It's not like, oh yeah, humanity and everyone else out there is are sinners and they're broken. It's you too. Like you're part of humanity, you know. You know, you're a human too, and you're just like them.
So
because
like
previously
humbled you in a sense.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like it was just a shock. It was a bit of a shock to the system because I was like, oh, like, not just everyone out there, but I am a sinner too.
Yeah, right.
I need Jesus too. And I think that was a huge moment where I just understood, I think God's grace for me personally, my own heart kind of going, that I needed a savior. Yeah. And I needed to follow Jesus as my king. Yeah. Made it very personal.
That's really cool. Like it sounded like you were taking so as you said, it was like intellectual, and in that sense, it's almost like, oh, I know a little bit more than people because it's an intellectual. But then when he humbles you, you're like, oh, now that's like he has my heart now. That's actually a really cool way.
Yeah.
And then I feel like there may be some other people that have become Christians that way too. But I just find it interesting. I just love how everyone's story is different. Like we recorded a chip lunch early today, and someone else's story is just completely different to yours. But isn't it just fascinating the way that God will just choose specific times to speak to you, like through that Romans verse for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely.
And man, that's wild. I just wanted to go back a little bit, if that's okay. You said you went to. Can you remind me of the church that you said you went to originally?
Yeah, it was a Chinese Australian Baptist church in West Ryde.
And I'm guessing there was obviously a lot of people from Chinese background going there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you find that helpful for you in terms of like just understanding like your background as well?
Yeah.
Because you said that you found people understood me a little bit. That's the reason I asked that question. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I don't know how conscious I would have been of it back then.
Right.
But I don't feel like I experienced like a whole heap of like bullying or racism, or explicit anyway, racism, when I was growing up at school. Yeah, I think a lot of my friends, were different cultures. Yeah. But I think there is something about, your parents coming from Hong Kong, migrating over to Australia, starting a new life, and being born kind of in between two different kind of cultures, two different worlds. Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of people nowadays also have that experience, even more so now in Australia. But I think, being, I guess, with those friends there at that church who also experienced the same thing, you kind of go, oh, yeah, like they get kind of some of the struggles, some of the cultural pressures, and the weirdness of growing up with like Chinese parents who have like these, certain expectations of you, of what you'll do in the future, your kind of career path. Yeah. Like they've got it all planned out, or some of them do. And the kind of very, family oriented, collectivist kind of culture. And then, but being born in Sydney, Australia, and Western kind of attitudes towards, just like the individualism that's, that I guess is more prominent in Western culture, and trying to figure out, well, what do I do? Like,
and your parents are probably doing that too, right?
That's right. Yeah. But I think, I mean, although different still, I think because, our parents, they grew up most of their life in Hong Kong. So it kind of, even though they experience that, they kind of butt up against that and engage with that. They're still firmly rooted in like, well, these are our values and this is our culture in Hong Kong or China. But for us who are born in Australia, like, we would say we're Aussie, we're Australian. And at the same time, people will look at us, oh, well, you're Chinese. And then, but then you might go back to Hong Kong. I might go back to Hong Kong, And I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm Chinese. I'm like, you are not Chinese. Your accent tells me straight away that you are from overseas.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things, like I'm sure a lot of immigrant kind of children kind of experience that of just being in this third place. Kind of.
Yeah, we had Jabish on earlier on the podcast,
right,
and his background is from India, and he came over when he was 10. He said very similar thing. He goes back over and sees family members, and they're like you speak Indian with an Australian accent and stuff like that.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. That's cool. The only other question I wanted to ask you, like just in the story you told us about how you became a Christian, was you said you were talking about suffering a lot and trying to understand that. Where do you think that came from, and why do you think it was so important to you to like kind of decipher that in terms of like God's perspective on that?
Yeah, I think it was probably a mix of, like things you'd see like in the playground. So you'd see, kids getting hurt, or like a bit of bullying, which is one aspect of that kind of just people suffering in a certain way. But then, I might watch the news, I think, and I'd see things happening around the world, people who are in famine, or people who were, where their countries were at war or something like that, or there were battles, and just kind of being somewhat just kind of confused. I think I was just curious. I was just like, I don't get, like the state we're in, it's kind of quite nice, and yet, there's other people experience life really differently. Yeah. And which is a bit weird. I think as a kid, kind of like in high school, I don't know how many other kids were thinking this way, but I think I took it quite seriously, and I guess I wanted to know. But it was one amongst many kinds of questions. But I guess when they would talk about some of this stuff at youth group, as I said, it kind of, I guess in a somewhat simple way, people would just talk about how, the world is really messed up, it's broken because of sin. I think that was, at that time, enough for me to kind of go, oh, okay.
There's an actual reason.
Yeah. Instead of that there was no reason at all.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe even like you were trying to discover a bit more meaning about like where's all this suffering happening, but is there a
point to it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's really fascinating.
So you spoke about becoming a Christian thinking about it more deeply by yourself. Did that change your family dynamic? Like, had your parents, had their attitudes to church kind of changed over that time, or was it still the same?
I don't think they ever had any kind of issues. Yeah. I mean, they let my sister and I go to church, actually. Yeah. And they even went to church for a while as well. So they went to the kind of the Cantonese speaking congregation of the same church. Yeah. Because they had so many kind of like friends there actually who are Christian, and that was fantastic that they were invited by those other brothers and sisters, really. So at this point in time, my dad would say he is Christian, and he continues to go to church. Like, we don't have the deepest kind of conversations about faith, but I think as best as I know, I remember that one day during high school, he actually just came out and said that to me. We're driving somewhere, and he was just like, I've decided to become a Christian. Whoa. And at that time I was just like, oh, cool. It just didn't really hit me until a lot later. I was just like, man, that like, it wasn't just cool. That was, that's God's goodness, God's grace bringing my dad to know Jesus. But my mum to this day is still not. So continue to pray for her. But for them, I think they didn't know exactly what that meant. Yeah. When I said, I'm gonna become Christian. Yeah. Often because maybe some of the cultural kind of aspects of coming to Australia, like why they came was kind of to have a better life
Yeah.
And often it gets kind of intermingled. They could be like, oh, well, cool, you're a Christian now, but actually we still want you to work hard to get a good, career, good salary, and so on. So Christianity is almost just a bit of another thing.
Side hustle.
Side hustle. Yeah, cool, no worries. Yeah, you can do that in your own time.
Yeah, as long as you have a good job or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. It's just another piece of the puzzle of your life, and so you can do that. That's cool. Without, I guess, because they're not Christian, they wouldn't understand that actually. It means you giving all of your life. You're not king of your own life anymore. You're not Lord. Jesus is, and that means, Jesus changes everything, right? It really does. But I think early on, they wouldn't have grasped that. Perhaps I didn't grasp all of the implications at that time. So I guess to answer your question, at that point in time, they were just very much like, cool. You can keep going to church.
Get a good UAI.
Yeah, keep studying. Keep studying, but you can keep going. And as long as it didn't really interfere with, other aspects of life, then you're like, sweet.
What were their reasons for coming from Hong Kong to Australia? Were there some particular reasons why you said they were looking for a better life, but what was the reason for wanting a better life?
Yeah, I think there was, in one part, it was kind of job, like prospects, job opportunities. I think particularly on my mum's side, when she was growing up, there wasn't much opportunity. It was kind of like quite a poor kind of community. So I think, like a lot of people looking to move overseas, like to Australia, to America, or different places, it just seems like there are more opportunities for family. Not just for jobs, but for family, to grow up in a different kind of lifestyle. Yeah. So I think that was probably the main things.
Is it hard to move from Hong Kong to Australia? Like, I wouldn't know anything about that. Was it a long process for them?
Yeah, I've never asked them that, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, like how long the process was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only reason I asked this in Jabish's episode, I think it was 4 years. It was a 4-year process to actually get approved to come to Australia. So I'm just wondering if it's the same from Hong Kong.
Well, it was funny. Like, what I do know is that my dad was working kind of like as an operations manager in a factory for a while. But when he came over, like he retrained. So he went to TAFE and studied kind of computer sciences. That's when IT was just starting to get up and going. And so he's a computer engineer. He's been in the same job since I was born.
Wow.
So,
with the same company?
With the same company.
Wow.
Yeah.
In IT, that's crazy.
I'm 36 now. He's been in that company for 36 years.
Has he?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is pretty epic.
Wow, with computers as well, like you just think of how much that job must have changed.
Yeah.
in that
So
amount of time.
the kind of coding that they're doing is
Yeah.
not the same now as it was back then.
Does that mean he's like almost like retrained himself in that job to do that coding and stuff like that?
Sorry, throughout the 36 years. Yeah. I'm sure like the company's probably given him a lot of training as well. But I guess he's had to learn stuff by himself, do some of his own courses.
Yeah.
You said that your parents are pushing on like the dream or the career. Were there particular aspirations they had for you? Did they want you to be go down a particular career path?
Not particularly. Not that I know of. Not that they kind of revealed to me, which I guess is kind of them. Because I think I know of a lot of other parents from Asian backgrounds. They name like kind of it'd be nice if you went into like law or like you did medicine or something like that, or they would kind of recommend that. As much as I know, my parents, I think they were just happy that I kind of worked hard, that I studied. I think I was pretty obedient kind of kid at school. So I think I would just kind of have my head down. At the times that, I was told, you're meant to be doing your homework or you're meant to study, I would just do it.
Mm.
And it was, yeah, so it was pretty. So yeah, I think they were okay with that. And so when I was thinking about university and so on, they were not like, oh, go do this or that subject. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is cool because I went into architecture actually, which is not kind of the usual kind of career path that I think most of my other friends were encouraged to go into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember what inspired you to do that, or what?
I enjoyed like design and tech.
Yeah.
During high school, I enjoyed doing things like making things like in the workshops.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed drawing. And that probably comes from my mum, actually.
Yeah.
Like just her creative side.
Yeah.
She just really likes to try new things and solve problems, like figure out new ways of doing things. And so I think the architecture course, not that it was all that I expected it to be.
Yeah.
Actually, you kind of find out architecture is just like this huge realm of things,
Yeah.
a whole new world at uni. But when I
Yeah.
went in, I think it was like, oh yeah, like I like drawing and I like making models.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that seems like some of the stuff they do.
Yeah.
It's a pretty
Okay.
brutal, like,
Yeah.
course at uni though, isn't it? Because don't you have to just be trying to like doing a lot all the time?
Yeah, it is brutal.
Yeah.
It's I think up to now it's a 5-year course if you want to finish like your bachelor and your master's
Right.
in one hit. Back when I was doing it, there was kind of like a midway work experience period, but altogether that meant kind of 6 years
Wow. Where did you
I
study?
at UNSW.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was, like just really like I think a third of the students in my year dropped out after the first year.
Wow.
It's kind of like this kind of culling kind of year where,
Yeah.
And the
you know,
toughest make it kind of thing.
yeah, it's like if this is what we're going to be doing, if you're not keen on this, feel free to duck out. So our year slimmed down a fair bit just even after the first year. But yeah, a lot of late nights. I think particularly in architecture, it's a nightmare for perfectionists.
Yeah.
Because the more time and the more energy you can spend on your projects and your drawings, kind of the nicer they might be.
Yeah.
But you got to draw lines, like
Yeah.
and particularly as a Christian, which by that time, like I could say, yeah, like I want to follow Jesus. It's rough because you're not competing, but like you want to achieve and you want to do well in your assignments.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you can't spend as much time as your other friends
Yeah.
doing that stuff.
Do you remember like any specific times where you had to draw that line, or like had to have a
Is that an architect joke?
draw that specific line? But yeah, do you remember any times where you were in that situation where you were like, oh, I really would like to, or well, I feel like I could spend another set amount of time on this, but I actually have committed to this, or I've committed to something else, or it's just something that happened?
Oh yeah, I think it was a lot of just a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of mistakes were made during those kind of 5-6 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so quite early on actually, in first year, I started leading at our youth group.
Oh yeah.
At in short, CABC West Ryde, Chinese Australian Baptist Church West Ryde.
CABC.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Got it.
CABC. And so that became kind of one of the things that was like a responsibility and a privilege actually to be able to serve the youth there and be part of this team. And so we took that quite seriously. And so there was, like each week we'd get together to prepare, and then Friday night we would, run. So that's 2 nights during the week already.
Yeah.
And I just remember even in the first year of architecture just going, this is nuts. Like I'm trying to do some prep, but then I'm pulling like all-nighters like every 3rd, 4th week just to get stuff done.
Yeah.
That's when I found out that I could do that, which was the worst.
Yeah, you don't want to know that it's possible.
Yeah, because like I have that ability now. Wow. And then so I can get my Bible studies written and done. and I can like spend all night doing this assignment and get it in on time.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is brilliant. And then by the end of first year, I was like, this is crazy. Like, what am I doing to myself?
Oh yeah, I remember
Yeah.
like slowly starting uni assignments later and later over the course of my uni degree until I remember being in fourth year or something and starting one on the day it was due.
Yeah.
Just like it's like that power where every time that you pull it off successfully, you're like, wow, now I can start it
Let's
a
push
little
it a
bit
bit
later
further,
next time.
Yeah. But I think that it was kind of during that period where I was like, okay, we really do have to figure out how to be sustainable
Yeah.
in this. Like, I can't keep doing this. Although, having said that, there were still a lot of all-nighters throughout the whole thing.
It's interesting that in the architecture world where like sustainability is starting to become a thing, it's not a thing about the actual architects who are designing it, right?
The workers who are trying to implement that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you remember what was your favorite design you ever did when you were in architecture?
At school.
Yeah, let's start with that because you obviously went into architecture after that too, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, give us your favorite one at uni and then your favorite one you ever did, in real life.
Oh, I remember in 5th year. So it wasn't my graduation year, but my 5th year, we went out to, like, all the way out to Broken Hill. Yeah, that was the furthest out west I'd ever gone, kind of in Australia at that point in time. But it was just an awesome kind of field trip where they took us to this national park, Mutawinji National Park, and they said, this is the site that our theoretical kind of project is based on.
Yeah.
This is the site you're going to be building. It's kind of like a researcher's kind of station and lodge. And we went out there and camped out there.
Wow.
It took us 2 days to bus out there, which was fun, but just really hot and kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And all our lecturers and our tutors just flew in. They took a plane in.
Oh, seriously. That's such an architect move too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let the minions get the bus.
Would be nice.
We'll see you guys
Must be
there.
nice.
Must be nice.
But yeah, must be nice.
Must be nice for them, huh?
But they, but actually the head professor or the lecturer, his name was Glenn Merkett. He's like one of the highest kind of, he's a Pritzker Prize winner, which means it's the kind of Nobel Prize of Architecture.
Wow.
And he's, I think, the only Aussie who's achieved that. And he led the studio for the whole semester. So yeah, that was a really memorable kind of place. He really cared about how we thought about designing for this land, for the people there. And yeah, I think it was the first time where I felt like, oh wow, like this is not only just something of interest, but it's really cool to be able to think about how people will live in a space. And
making a contribution.
Yeah.
Your design actually contributes to people's like well-being or experience or something like that. Yeah.
And how it affects the environment.
Yeah.
So like, not destroying too much of it. Or trying to work with the land, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So if you at uni, did you have much interaction with the Christian groups and stuff like? Because there's a pretty big presence at NSW, isn't there?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I did. Probably not as much as some of my friends who are really involved, but part of so I went along to a lot of the public meetings, the talks with Campus Bible Study, the Christian group there, and it was a real blessing. I remember going to the talks, in my first year the mid-year conference there, which is like a camp that they go on for like a whole week, and just spend time together, hanging out, hearing talks, going through kind of seminars and stuff, learning about like a theme for the whole week, which is really cool, and just really enjoying that, seeing that there were other Christians, other people around at university as well, who you could kind of encourage, but also be encouraged by to kind of live out your faith at university. So yeah, that was really huge, and I really enjoyed that. I'm really thankful for that time there. And also, it was funny because architecture as a faculty during that time, they didn't have enough resources to have like a trainee or someone to look after our faculty.
Yeah.
And they also, I think it was also like, because people were so invested in in design or architecture or landscape architecture, whichever subject they were doing, there weren't often many Christians who would rock up to the Bible study. And so it was really difficult, I think, for them to help out. And so there was another group that came in called the Fellowship of Evangelism for Visual Arts. And they were multi-camp. They went to all these different universities.
Yeah.
But they were like, oh, well, we can look after this faculty, which is my faculty. And so, yeah, there was a guy called Cameron who was just really faithful and just meeting up for Bible studies, whether it was 1 or 2 or 3. And he just kept coming and reading the Bible with us. And so that was really formative and helped a lot, I think, during the kind of struggle of like, architecture is so hard, uni's so hard, youth ministry is so hard. And often, to add on to that, at our church, there was a high turnover of ministers often, just for different reasons, some good and some not so good. And so that often meant that we, like even in the youth ministry, we were kind of by ourselves. We just had to, like, we'll try this. Yeah. We'll do this.
Yeah.
That didn't work. Let's try this. Let's try something else.
That is youth ministry, though, right?
That is.
Like a lot of it is that kind of thing, as you could probably
it's
explain.
my favorite part.
Yeah.
So. Okay, so we finished at uni then, for example. Sorry, you finished at uni. I didn't. I did finish uni, but I didn't do architecture for 5 or 6 years. It was interesting to hear you say how hard it was. I don't think I had that. I mean, this was hard parts of uni for me, but I don't think I would say, uni was hard, like yourself, which is interesting depending on what course you're doing. So when you finish architecture, you need to become a graduate architect somewhere, right? And you've got to find a firm to work for and all that kind of stuff. How did that play out? And what are your thoughts at that time?
Yeah. It can be a pretty difficult process. Although I think like any graduate looking for a job, I know for myself, I was a little picky because I think design and architecture in itself, everyone has a certain bent, a certain kind of way they like to think about architecture. And so even then you can either choose to just go, whichever first job comes up, or I really want to work with these offices or these firms and really gun for them, like really go for it, really set up your portfolio to look really nice and then really pitch for a certain job. And so I think the first office I went to was a really big office. They'd done a lot of international work, quite renowned, but really like difficult to work in as a young grad. Like they just, and probably not the most organized, I suppose, in terms of how they used their graduates. But it was a bit strange. Like I think after I worked there for like 8 months, and I think it was really strange. Like at Christmas, like when everyone's meant to go on a break, they kind of got rid of all their grads. And I think it was I won't say the name of the office, but I think it was because they wouldn't want to pay for like holiday leave. Yeah. Because like afterwards they invited like some of the grads back, like after January.
It's definitely holiday leave.
Yeah. So I was in there for 8 months, but after that I went to another office, and that's the office that I worked in for the next, I think, I forget now. Could have been 6 years, 5-6 years.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I asked you the question about your favourite project. Then, what about your favourite project when you were working for that firm?
It'd have to be. There's this house that we worked on for one of the richest women in Australia, in Chippendale. Yeah, and it's an amazing house, and it's got this kind of concrete kind of frontage, like facade, we call it. Like it's just very sculptural. The things like concrete, super heavy, and to form it in ways where it like bends and curves into a very sculptural form, it's like you don't see that often because it's just really hard, really expensive. But I worked on this house with a bunch of with the team, and it was just a really cool experience.
I think I might have seen this on a show. Is it?
Oh, really?
Is it the one with like the massive concrete staircase inside? Like it's really wide.
It is a massive it's brick staircase, but
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it is
Thank you for correcting me.
at the back of the house. Well, I mean, the front is complete concrete
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
I think that's the same one. Is it like a couple of like a 3 or 4 levels?
3 levels, yeah. It was
Yeah.
an old warehouse or factory.
Yeah.
And they pretty much, all they did was they kept the side walls and the back wall, and they gutted everything else. And then they pretty much just redid the whole thing. Yeah, it's an amazing house. So much money put into it.
Yeah.
It's kind of...
I remember watching it, like I think it was the woman that you're speaking about, but like, why do you have such a large house for just yourself?
For just herself, yeah.
That was, it had a like gigantic long table in the in the dining
custom-made,
room.
yeah.
Yeah, it was this crazy custom made table, but it was like 40 places or something. I don't know how many. It was like,
I think 60 perhaps.
what?
Perhaps, yeah.
It's room for friends.
Yeah. Large dinner parties.
Yeah. She wanted to hold like art parties and stuff like that. I think I remember saying, but
yeah.
well, that's pretty cool. It's cool
Yeah.
to have something that's sort of like real iconic design in Sydney.
Yeah, it was just really fun to work on. I think my boss would just tell me, like, this is a once in a lifetime kind of commission to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She, I think she said to him, I want my house to win awards. and it did.
And it did,
Like,
right? Yeah.
So, because there was so much kind of just hours and energy and time put into it. Very
Yeah.
meticulous. Yeah.
It would take years to build.
Years. I think it was, like a few years.
Couple of years or
Couple of
something.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you find that shift going from then uni to the workplace and being a Christian in that environment?
It was. Oh yeah, I remember it being so hard. It was so rough.
Yeah.
So I think firstly, not just as a Christian, but as a human, just like feeling the tiredness of full-time work.
Yeah.
You know, you just kind of, you're like, what am I doing? Like, how do I survive? This is just the first day. But I think what I came to enjoy, and it was interesting because I'd done full-time work in between. Like I said, I did some work experience in between. But I think that those first few experiences of full-time work were that it was a wonderful mission field. Like it was just such, as a Christian, often I would hear about like, how important gospel ministry was, and I'd been to like some conferences during university that kind of encouraged us to think about going into full-time gospel ministry.
Yeah.
And I think, I guess at that time I was like, yeah, let's do gospel ministry, everyone, let's go. I guess as a side story, I'll tell you, like after coming back from that conference, I told my mom my non-Christian mom, I'm thinking about going into like full-time gospel ministry.
Yeah.
And her reaction was like, she just laughed. She's like, you haven't worked a job in your life. up until that time, this is early university, before even the work experience, I hadn't worked. I hadn't needed to work, and they'd been very gracious to just support me through university. And so she laughed and she said that. And I was just like, it's a fair point. I don't know anything about work. But I told my dad, and he was a Christian at that point. He'd come to follow Jesus, and he was a bit more sober about it. He was like, that's fantastic that you're convicted by the gospel, and you want to do that. But maybe it'd be good to finish your degree, and work a bit, see what it's like to work full time. I thought it's a good idea. Yeah, that makes sense. That sounds wise.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the path that I kind of followed. But those seeds of full-time kind of gospel ministry were planted.
Yeah.
And so they were kind of just slowly there. It meant that my parents actually very early on knew that was something that I had at least thought about. Yeah. So even though I didn't go straight in, each year I would talk a bit about ministry just in general at church and the things I was involved in. And so coming out of university, those things were still kind of in my mind.
Yeah.
But as I went into work, I think I kind of just experienced this real desire to see like my colleagues who didn't know Jesus kind of really consider who he is, at least examine kind of what they believed in.
Yeah.
It was a great mission field. And so I was just like, as I went into work, I was like, there's so much to be done out here.
Yeah.
There's so much just space for Christians to shine as lights in this world, to love those around them, and to be quite intentional about, building those friendships. They're not just as, distant kind of colleagues or workmates, but actually as, friends. Like, you spend so much time with them.
Yeah.
But that you can, go out with them and hang out with them and try and share Jesus with them. So I think that as a Christian, that was like huge for me. And in some ways, it's not exactly the reason why I stayed in architecture for like 6 years. Yeah. But that was one of the things I enjoyed.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was having a conversation with 2 friends at college yesterday. Actually, about how kind of the topic ended up kind of being, how did your parents take it when you told them you were going into full-time ministry? And just the different, it was funny because we were talking to a few people from different cultures. So one of them's from a Chinese background and another one is from a Sri Lankan background. And it was really interesting hearing the different responses to that situation of, some of them got, like, one of my friends was telling me his mum just started crying. And it was just so like, hard. I can't believe you're throwing your whole life away. And he's from an Asian background, and she was just like, you've studied for this degree, you don't have a wife, you're never going to have a wife if you go into full-time ministry, like all this hectic stuff.
Implications.
Exactly. So it's such an interesting thing. And then I was comparing that with my situation, which was really just confusion. That was just like, oh, cool. Like, okay.
There's so many different responses there.
Yeah, absolutely. And
it's such a mix of people probably going to college too.
Absolutely.
I mean that's, it speaks to particularly the immigrant story. Story of the sacrifice of leaving their home and coming to a new place. Yep.
We've got to make a real good go of this, because we're almost burning the bridges in a sense. Like, we're coming to a new country and we're going to make this happen.
Well, I mean, like, I could say for my parents, like, even though, I mean, it was not the same reaction as them, but I think for many friends who've had those kind of responses, it's because for some of them, like, we never went to university. Yeah. You've gone to university. What are you doing? Like, why are you, like, this has nothing to do with you studying finance or like commerce or medicine. Like, what's happened? It is a bit of confusion, a bit of bewilderment usually.
And it's also part of their sacrifice, that they're like, we're doing this to perhaps have a better life for ourselves, but most importantly for our children. And then when you say, I'm going to go study the Bible. But then I wonder if it's like, well, it's also like a version of college, but I suppose if it's primarily like their parents or from a non-Christian background, then they're like, what are you talking about?
Yes, it makes even less sense, if they're non-Christian.
Did you, so you went from architecture into an MTS kind of role?
Yeah, that's right. So I finished up, I did some exams for my architecture to get registered, stayed for another year, and then I think during that point, originally I was thinking of just going straight into college. I was like, I've studied 6 years already in architecture. I've worked for 6 years. Study could be another 3 or 4 years. I'm like, that's a lot of
it's a lot of time study.
And it was at that point where I was talking to some of my closer Christian friends, going, oh, this is what I'm thinking about doing. What do you reckon? And they knew about my plan. What makes me so mad was that they knew about my plan to kind of go straight into college, and because then I could just go and do gospel work, go into ministry. And then they were like, oh, maybe you should consider doing a traineeship like for 2 years. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's like another 6 years. That's 6 years altogether. But that was I think coming through all of that and thinking through that and praying through that, I think it was actually it was the best thing to do. Actually, I'm so glad that God kind of brought me through that.
Yeah.
What was the tipping point to go, I'm done with architecture?
One of the things was that I guess it wasn't that strategic, but I think for my parents, again, security is a huge thing, like because you're leaving something that was a profession, was something that was somewhat secure, even though it's not. You know, like you know, any job is not fully secure.
Yeah.
But they were just like, they thought that was a more secure thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And sorry, no.
Yes, you've been distracted by our kids at Fuse, which are making a bit of a noise in the next room.
It's a good noise.
It's a good noise.
The more the better.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think the tipping point was me kind of going. I think going through those exams and the interviews, getting registered. And I think for them, they felt like, oh, well, he's registered as an architect now.
You can always go back to it.
Yeah, potentially he could always go back. Even though I didn't need to do that. Like I could still always work in an office.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think that helped them. And I was, I thought that was, I was okay to do that. And I think that then allowed a bit of breathing space, a bit of freedom to kind of go. I've thought about it for like almost 8-9 years now.
Yeah.
And I think for them, then it wasn't such a shock. It didn't. They knew I could like look after myself, and they didn't have to worry about me. I think that's probably for a lot of parents. That's their main concern. They just care for their kids, and they worry about them. So after that, I think because I'd been involved in ministry at church, a lot of youth ministry, kind of on the council there. I'd been involved in like a summer mission in Cowra. So just doing for, I think up to like, 11, 12 years or something like that, like long time.
Yeah.
Each year, just during January, going there. So it just kept things on the boil, thinking about ministry.
Yeah.
And so at that point I was like, oh yeah, I think now is probably the time to test out whether I would be suitable and capable of going into full-time ministry, which is why the traineeship was that helpful. And not going straight to college, in my case anyway.
Where does Mary come into this story? Because that would be interesting, because obviously if you were together, then you would have played a part in making that decision together.
Yeah, that's right. At that time we were dating. Yeah, we came from the same church. Yeah, we kind of grew up leading youth group together. She was a few years below me, and she was one of those people who were like, oh yeah, like a traineeship could be a good idea. And I was like,
damn you.
I was like, what do you mean? I think the impression was I thought that like it would be 6 years until I'd be like doing ministry again. But actually the reality was that the traineeship was like going straight into full-time ministry. Yeah. Because that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to like kind of test you, help you to fail and see like what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. Yeah. And then see whether you're suitable or whether you should give it a crack. Yeah. So Mary was part of that decision, and God's blessing in that sense. Like, she encouraged that, and she had gone through that path actually. So she has also done a traineeship. She finished that, and she was at University of Sydney at the Cumberland campus, the health sciences campus, doing that. And then she also went to college for 3 years.
Oh,
so
wow.
she was kind of ahead of me in that sense. And a big influence in that.
Gotta catch up to you.
I never caught up. she finished before. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So tell us about the college experience. What did you learn from that? And obviously I'm guessing you were glad that you did it.
Yeah. The college experience was it was super just formational, I think. I loved learning with everyone else there. So the community aspect of it, just sitting over lunch, just chatting about the stuff that you didn't understand from the lecture.
Is that what happens, Brayden?
Yes.
And just quizzing each other, and it's so cool. Like to be out, and it's a great privilege actually to take 4 years out to have people supporting you, like praying for you, financially supporting you as well, and then being able to study God's word, to delve deeper into it. It was really humbling as well, just to see like how much I didn't know, and I still feel like that, like after finishing a lot of times. And I guess it's so encouraging to be able to talk to people who are thinking about taking the gospel not only out to Sydney, not only to the rest of Australia, but out into the rest of the world. There's such a diverse mix of people there who love Jesus, and we get to partner together, to tell others about Jesus. Like, it's fantastic. Yeah.
From the Joey that came in to Bible college and the Joey that graduated end of last year, is that right?
Yeah, end of last year. Yeah.
What do you think was the biggest change in yourself?
Oh yeah. I think I went in kind of a very, what's the word, like quite dichotomous, like as in like I would think, oh, there's either a right or a wrong, like very like black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I went in going, oh, I think I know these things, and I think like those things won't change, like the things that I know of the Bible. Yeah. And I was proven wrong in so many ways. But what I really enjoyed about I think particularly church history of all things really helped me to see how often grey a lot of things in church life, in practice are. We want to be really sharp and as Christians just want to be really faithful in our understanding of God's word, and yet like throughout the ages people have interpreted things maybe a little bit differently, they've practiced things a bit differently, and it's because of like their context, it's because of the different people that are around them, different people they serve, the kind of different pressures, and I didn't study history when I was in high school, so it was kind of just this, it was just fascinating how God has worked throughout history through the ups and downs, through Christians being really faithful and Christians and other people, not being as faithful, but for God to be over all of that. And I think coming out of college, probably the biggest change has been like just being able to go, oh yeah, like some things are not as black and white as I think they are. And there just needs to be so much more grace amongst Christians to listen, to still have their convictions, to still stand and plant their flag on certain things, but to just to listen to others and to be really gracious with how they interact with other Christians, who might think a bit differently.
That sounds a little bit similar to what you were talking about when you like that Romans verse back at the start. We were speaking about like just being humbled by God, and that sounds quite similar to that. Like comparing the black and white to when you came out of college, you was like, oh, there's another moment of humility.
It's a constant work.
Totally.
Very thankful for it.
Hey, Brayden, before we ask the final question, do you have any other questions for Joey?
Oh, just we started this podcast chatting about West Ryde and the exciting opportunity that you have there, and obviously you've only been stuck in formally for a little while. I just like to know, like, what are you most excited for in this new opportunity? Like,
good
is
question.
there something that you're just like, man, I can't wait to just get involved? Like, what is? What are you keen for?
I've only known them for a little while, but I can't wait to just kind of do life alongside them. Get to know them more. Get to know how, I guess their story about coming to, for those who are Christian, how they came to know Jesus. What's on their heart in terms of, serving Him. I'm excited about, I think just down the road, one of the things I've been talking to the other, pastors about is just down the road from the location that we're at now is Meadowbank. And there's, as far as I know, I don't think there's, I'm not sure if there's another kind of reformed kind of evangelical church around there. But whether there is or not, there's so many people moving into that area.
Yeah.
There's such a great mission field there.
Yeah.
People who live there every day and who need to know Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know when we're going to be able to start, kind of trying to be in that community.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm excited about, to be able to just kind of get involved, get to know the people there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And hopefully invite them along to a meal, hang out, and to hear about Jesus. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Great answer, by the way. Great question, great answer. Final question before we wrap up the chips, as we like to say, for the podcast. If you could go back in time and speak to your younger Christian self, what would you like to tell yourself?
Such a good question. There's so many things I'd like to tell myself. I probably a big one would be. Can I go with two? Actually,
Absolutely.
No. This is very legalistic rules here. No, you can. We'll show this one time because it's your first time.
That's right.
And last time now. But actually, funny. Speaking of legalism, it would be. I think related to that.
Okay.
Just beware of moralism. Just being moralistic, thinking that. And I guess linked to that, like being quite judgmental, I suppose. But I guess personally that, like it has throughout my Christian journey been quite easy to fall into that trap of doing good things, of having good morals, of seeing those around me kind of, oh man, that guy is like so much more godly or does these things better than I do. I got to do that so that, God will love me more. Right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I think early on in my Christian life, that was something I wrestled with a lot. So, and I think there's residues of that can come back every now and then.
Okay.
And so I think just being aware of that, the dangers of that, and how that kind of can cheapen God's grace, like how good God's grace is. I guess, and the second one is just, don't take yourself too seriously. I think I was pretty kind of, I had a lot of fun, but sometimes I was a bit too serious as growing up as a kid, and even as as a Christian, sometimes that probably links to that moralism as well. Like just going, this is right and this is wrong, and I guess that comes full circle, right? The black and white stuff. But I think that, just being a bit more relaxed, knowing God's good, and He's in control, and trusting Him a lot more. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Actually, I think you just named the title of this episode "Full Circle" because you've settled in West Ryde, and then went through all these other things, but now you're back in West Ryde as a pastor there. So that's really cool. Thank you. Time to wrap up the chips, Joey. Thank you so much for being on.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining.
It's been so much fun.
Thank you for joining the Soul Revival team.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, and thank you for your service to us. As it's only just starting, but thank you for serving us in that way and. Being willing to stick it out at Bible college and then go and start serving our crew at West Ryde. So we're really thankful. Yeah, we're really thankful for you, man. So thank you very much. Brayden, as always, thank you.
Thank you for having me again.
That's all right, no worries. Joey, we always finish all one way, and I don't know, have you been educated on the one way? Okay.
Yeah, we did our graduation, man.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I didn't see that. I even watched the live stream. I didn't see it.
There'll be a
photo.
photo.
We're going to have to find that.
Yeah.
If we find that, we'll put that on the pod
Yeah,
day.
It was afterwards.
Probably.
Was it?
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Fee will have it.
Fee should have it. We'll get it from her anyway.
Yeah.
But again, thank you very much for being on. Thank you for listening, everyone, or watching, and we'll finish with the one way.